Welcome to the Establish the Edge podcast. This is the Week 6 GPP Game Scorers podcast. You may notice that I am not Michael Leone, who is busy this week. I am Jack Miller, and I will be hosting the podcast this week. And Leone is much more gifted in the DFS tournament's streets than I am, and as a result, it is very good news that I am joined, as usual, by Adam. Adam, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on, Jack. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to fill in. And as usual, I think we're going to start with a quick recap of the week 5 slate. So I'll kick it over to you for that one, Adam.
Yeah, so Jack's got the week 5 game stack plot that I make up on his screen there. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of see the recap of how the games compared from last week's main slate in terms of average ownership versus the top 8 scoring averages for using DK points only as just a reminder. But you can see when the plot looks as linear as it does, when you can just draw a straight line from end to end, and then kind of ever sloping up pattern like that, that's usually not a good week for contrarian DFS builds. The games at the top right were the most owned, and they also primarily scored the most points. So if you were on, I mean, you had to have Jamar Chase to win last week. I think we all know that. But he was chalk, and the second highest scoring position player in that game was Marquise Brown, who was also chalk. So even Joe Burrow was was a lesser owned quarterback you could have had that you had to complete the game stack. But the way I like to play, Jack, is building contrarian stacks, mixing in with a little bit of chalk here and there that I think makes sense. It's not as fun to me when the chalk hits all across the board. You'll see the outlier there at the bottom right with the Eagles and the Rams game. The problem with that is that the prices kind of made it too difficult to create full game stacks with that. Having complementary pieces here and there were good, but the purpose of the game score is just to try to find game environments where we can build game stacks. So hoping for a little bit more of a fun week this week, and a week where we can have multiple ways to win.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting week this week. As I'll navigate over to the game scores here, you can see that the highest total right now is 48. There's a lot of weather this week. It's kind of hard. We record this on Friday morning. It's kind of hard to know exactly what the weather's going to look like on Sunday, 2 days in advance, but we should have a better idea come Sunday. And so I know that from a projection standpoint, we are going to be toggling right up the kickoff with reports of wind and rain and all that. What are you thinking for this slate?
Well, just in general, I think there's going to be a lot of value in saving on quarterback this week, which I think is a good thing. I think it helps you build lineups with more complete game stacks if that's the way you want to go. And I think more specifically on DraftKings, there's a lot more value at quarterback there. I think Jalen Hurts probably better value on FanDuel. But specifically on DraftKings, there's just a lot of different cheap quarterback options you can build around, which is exciting. Typically on a slate where the highest total is 48, that doesn't usually get me excited when we do these game score pods on Thursdays or Fridays. But I actually have a good feeling about it, despite the low totals, just because of the different ways I think we're going to be able to build.
Yeah, we'll start with that Rams Cardinals game because that has the highest total and the highest game score on both DK and FanDuel. Last week, Cooper Kupp obviously made his return, and we saw the targets were super concentrated around Kupp and Puka Nacua. Tutu Atwell was still in the full-time role, and the Cardinals have surprisingly been better than expected on offense. So that game has a little bit of intrigue on a week that otherwise is a little bit lacking.
I think the best part about it, and you kind of alluded to it in your introduction of the game, but Arizona has been exceeding expectations as far as offensive output and their ability to support these game environments where shootouts can happen, where they can support game stacks. Joshua Dobbs has been great. Marquise Brown has been great, although he's been chalky. He's been great. Zach Ertz, although he's been chalky, has been great. You had that one Michael Wilson week, even though nobody played him that week. But this is if you want to play, Cooper Kupp, who's a great value and projecting for, kind of modest ownership, to be honest. Puka Nakua is not as strong of value, but he's projecting for low ownership. I mean, those guys are going to be leverage in terms of ownership off Kyron Williams, who's projecting over 20% right now. So it's exciting. I mean, you can build this game. Last week, the Rams played the Eagles, and you're talking about, okay, well, I got to fit Cooper Kupp and I got to fit Puka, and I'm going to try to fit him with AJ and Jalen Hurts, and it just gets too constrained with salary. But here, you can build around Matthew Stafford, who's at a lesser price tag. You can build around Joshua Dobbs. You can mix in a Zach Ertz. You can mix in a Marquise Brown. And you're still getting that kind of lower ownership on the Rams receivers. Even if you wanted to play Tutu Atwell, who's a bad value, so to speak, not a great value, but I mean, you could still do it. There's lots of ways to build. So it's a top game score for a reason, highest average ceiling on the slate. And that's one I'm definitely going to be looking at.
Yeah, I think Stafford and that Rams passing offense is pretty interesting moving forward. It was Kupp's first game back, obviously, and the Rams had their highest single game pass rate of the season in neutral game script. Stafford also has a 2.5% touchdown rate, which is pretty ridiculous considering how well he's playing. So just generally, I think that the Rams offense could be one to buy moving forward. But moving on to the next game, which is the Dolphins and the Panthers, you can see it is the third highest game on DK and second on FanDuel. The Dolphins offense obviously just ridiculous every week. So what are you seeing here?
Well, I mean, Tyreek Hill's ceiling is just absolutely absurd. I mean, on DraftKings, his ceiling is almost 2 points higher than the next highest player on the entire slate. So you know what you're getting with Tyreek Hill. You're going to play him into some ownership, but not any ownership that scares me. Or Raheem Mostert is projecting higher than he is. So, the thing with me with the Dolphins is, I think that building the game stack around this game is going to be a little trickier because I feel like I'm going to be more inclined to just build around Tua stacks. I don't know how excited I would be to build around Bryce Young stacks. They're both not great values, but both will be very low owned. But Adam Thielen has exceeded our expectations every week. He's another strong value again. I mean, you could get Tyreek and Adam Thielen right now, and your cumulative ownership is not going to be crazy. So that mini correlation, I think, will be pretty popular if people are targeting this game. Jalen Waddle continues to be priced a little higher than I would like, given his performances, but he showed signs of life last week, at least putting up a little bit of a higher score than he had previously. So, I think if you're playing into the game stack here with pass catchers, you're going to be okay on ownership. You're just going to kind of have to deal with how do you structure your Tua stack with Tyreek, and then if you come back with Thielen, that may be the most popular way to go. Doubles with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle might be a little constraining on salary, but I think mini correlations will be fine in this game. But it's the second highest. I believe it's the second highest total on the slate at 47.5. So at least you got that. And yeah, I think I'd be fine playing either DK or FanDuel on this game. But right now, I'd probably lean a little bit more towards playing it on FanDuel.
Yeah, worth noting that on this game, we are still waiting for news on the Miami backfield behind Raheem Mostert. We're projecting Jeff Wilson in right now. Salvin Ahmed is also dealing with an injury, or he has been dealing with an injury. So if Wilson is out, I think that we will end up bumping the Mostert projection a little bit. So that's something to watch over the weekend. But moving on to the next game, which is Cincinnati and the Bengals. We've got the T. Higgins injury question. He seems like he's going to play, but obviously we've seen instances in the past where T. Higgins is active and doesn't end up playing a whole lot. There are a couple games like that last year. We are projecting T. Higgins in right now, but I'm hoping that we will get more clarity on how much we expect him to be fully healthy, what workload we can expect from him. But we are expecting Higgins in right now. And if he's limited or a decoy or even inactive, we saw the absurd Jamar Chase goal last week. So we'll see how that shakes out. But what are you thinking here, Adam?
It's a bit of a surprising game for me in terms of how it sets up because the total is in my opinion, surprisingly low at 44.5. Given the performances, last week's performance we saw from Cincinnati, and the historical performances we've seen from the Seattle offense as well. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. When you have low totals, I mean, typically the ceiling kind of reflects that, but the average ceiling is actually the second highest on the slate of any game. So I want to be looking at this game. I don't know, Jack, if you know off the top of the head, if this is one of those games with weather concerns in Cincy, but perhaps that might be playing a factor into it. But for the Bengals, it's kind of a repeat setup as last week in terms of how they project. I mean, Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon project really well, but both of them are projecting as very chalky. And last week, Jamar Chase was the beneficiary of that and broke the slate, and Joe Mixon did not. So we're looking at a similar setup. If T. Higgins is back, which we're projecting him in for now, yeah, that would change. I think that would certainly change the range of expected outcomes for Chase. As far as I don't know if a 50 bag is in him, for 2 consecutive weeks. If Higgins is back in this game and he is truly healthy, I kind of like him in this spot. I don't think many people are going to want to play him at all. But yeah, it's a little bit unnerving given that we've seen him come back from injury and then basically be a decoy. So there is some inherent risk baked in there. The nice thing about this is that, Seattle is never typically priced too high. Again, Geno Smith is another value at quarterback that you can save on, that opens up salary for the rest of your lineup. And, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf have solidified roles. They're not priced too high. Lockett would be my choice just because he's a little bit of a better value and he's less expensive. But both are projecting, for modest ownership, but you're getting that discount on Lockett. So I like him a little bit better there. So yeah, I mean, look, you could play with Geno Smith, but this game isn't too expensive. You could play with Joe Burrow as well. You can go back to the well with the Burrow Chase stack, and then use a Seattle bring back if you want. And this is another pace up game. Pat Thorman is his write up weekly, and that's something that we like to look at when we're talking about the GPP game scores, because obviously pace is such a big part of it. And most of the games that we're talking about on this podcast project as pace up games, so we like that as well.
Yeah, this game actually looks like it's going to be one of the better ones weather-wise. Kevin Roth at Roto Grinders has low-ish sustained winds, like 12 miles an hour, and then maybe a chance of light rain. So it doesn't seem like weather's going to be a concern here. Something I'm just generally excited to see in this game is there's so much, buzz around the post-bye rookie bump. I'm excited to see if they start giving JSN real routes or Charbonnet a little more work. But that's just something that is likely I'll be watching for future weeks. But on to the Jaguars and the Colts. This game, obviously, Anthony Richardson will not be playing, so Gardner Minshew will be the guy starting at quarterback for the Colts. Jags offense has started to put it together the last few weeks, and Gardner Minshew is pretty cheap. So what are you thinking here?
Yeah, in terms of ceiling, comparing to the other games that we've talked about, we're not getting up to the same average ceiling that those games are bringing. So it's a little bit lower in that respect, but we're getting a lot of value here and a lot of different ways to build. And as kind of as the theme of this week, we've got another quarterback at a great value in Gardner Minshew, who you can really plug in and build really, really lots of good variations of stacks around him if you want. Trevor Lawrence as well. I mean, he's not a terrific value by any means, but he's certainly not a bad value at his price. The thing you've got to consider here is kind of how you play into ownership here on the Jag side. We've got Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk projecting for chalk. at over 20% on DraftKings. On FanDuel, that's going to be a little bit different, but primarily I'm playing on DraftKings, so that's why I kind of refer to their ownerships a little bit more. The interesting part about this game is that Calvin Ridley, who isn't as good of value as the other guys who I just mentioned, is coming in and projecting for very low ownership, and he's only 6,700 on DraftKings right now. His ceiling isn't of the elite tier of the other wide receivers on the slate, but he's got such a defined role in that offense. That role kind of came back to life a little bit in London last week. The only thing, I don't know if people buy into the narrative of, the Jags coming back from a 2-week stay in London, if that affects them, if that's going to inhibit their ability to play, but they are playing at home against a defense that, has been inconsistent at best. On the Colts side, there's, I think, two guys that I would be targeting here in pass catchers, and that'd be Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. Right now, projecting for modest, somewhat modest ownership, depending on the site. Michael Pittman's ceiling is, pretty decent compared to where it's been. So, if you wanted to build around those two guys, there's just lots of ways to build here. And even Travis Etienne, I don't want to exclude running backs when we're talking about game stacks, because that's certainly a viable strategy. And Etienne seems to have a really solid role, both in the passing game and the running game, and with high value touches, as we saw last week. He finally kind of broke out. So I kind of like the idea of playing around a Minshew stack if you think this game's going to pop. But yeah, it's another intriguing game, even though the game score is not as strong as the others, primarily just because of the ownership that's Jacksonville is soaking up there.
Yeah, you mentioned Pittman and Downs. Pittman has about a 30% target share with Minshew this year. Downs is about 21%. And Downs has started getting some downfield targets more. At the start of the year, his ADOT was like 5 or lower. The past couple weeks, it's been 17-ish, and then 8.5 last week, which still isn't great, but it's a big step in the right direction. So I think that they will be in line for significant volume, at least. But then on to the last game we'll talk about, which is the Bears and Minnesota. Vikings will not have Justin Jefferson for this game, so it'll be Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, and Brandon Powell as their top 3 wide receivers against the Bears defense that has struggled a lot this year, but they're expected to get some key pieces in the secondary back, still not expected to be very good defense. And then the Bears on the other side have really picked it up over the past week and look to keep it going against the Vikings defense that has been one of the worst in the league so far.
Yeah, if you're looking at it from just a projection standpoint, or how we look at it in the game scores table, the game score overall not exciting. The ceiling on it, the average ceiling, not exciting. You're not getting a ton of value. It is affordable, and it's not going to be super owned. But I think just the way I'm thinking about this game is these defenses are just bad. They're just bad, even without Justin Jefferson. Both of these defenses have just been absolute sieves this year. So, if you're just looking at it from a football perspective, it seems like an interesting game to look at. Justin Fields has finally come to life in the last couple of weeks. I think if you're going to stack around this game, or even build a correlation around this game, he seems like the QB of choice. He may be one of, in my opinion, the few expensive options on DraftKings that I'd be willing to play. I'd probably want to play him over Jalen Hurts on DraftKings, but it might be a different story on FanDuel. You may want to play. I would understand if you'd want to play Jalen Hurts over Justin Fields on FanDuel, but I kind of like this game, how it sets up. People are not going to want to click on it because Justin Jefferson is out. But KJ Osborne, I know you've had some good thoughts on him. He might be a standout value and a standout play in this game. I'm excited to see how Minnesota gets Jordan Addison more involved. We may see an expanded role for guys like Hockenson and Madison. And those 4 guys are where the offense is going to be concentrated around. And on the other side, we've kind of seen it with DJ Moore. He's come to life with Justin Fields. They seem to have a good rapport going. Moore is not projecting for high ownership also. So, when we're looking at games kind of like this, where they're a little more off the board, they're very low. They're going to be projecting for pretty low ownership. I like these more in large field tournaments as a target for a game stack, maybe as opposed to like a small field tournament where you kind of really need to, you need to have like the top 1% of lineup to do really well. And sometimes you get these weird games where, again, from a projection standpoint, the Bears and the Vikings don't seem like it would be a shootout, but if you get lucky and the defenses, perform the way that they've been performing, you can fall into a pretty good score here. So it's an intriguing game for me.
Definitely. So those are the 5 games we're going to talk about today, which means it is time for the dirt stacks or the dirt plants.
Dirt plants. Yeah, we're going dirt plants.
Dirt plants. My God, I'm showing my inexperience on this show here. But I'll start it off with KJ Osborne, who we just talked about. Adam was just saying how he likes that game because the defenses are so bad, and that's a lot of the thesis here. With Justin Jefferson out, TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison are the 2 guys who are easier to foresee a big role for, but Addison has not been that amazing at earning targets so far. I do like Addison too, and I think he's going to wind up being the wide receiver 1 in JJ's absence, but there's been some smoke out of Minnesota that Osborne is going to be the guy at first stepping into that Jefferson role, not to the extent that Jefferson is in that role, obviously, but the wide receiver 1 for the short term until Addison overtakes him. And the Bears defense has been so brutal so far. The Vikings passing offense has been so good. Losing Jefferson is a huge hit to that passing offense and to the projected efficiency. But Osborne is in line for a pretty sizable target share against a bad defense. We're showing him as a pretty solid value on DraftKings. So I'm going to go with KJ Osborne. He's pretty cheap overall. And yeah.
Great. I like that. I like that a lot. I think everything you said makes a lot of sense. And even with Jefferson in the lineup, I mean, Osborne's had a role in that offense too. So I can only imagine what his role is going to be without Jefferson in the lineup. And Kirk Cousins, as people want to dog on him all they want, but like he's good at getting his receivers involved and making them look better. So I'm excited about that play. I like it. For me, this is a little bit of a pressure situation for me because I don't want to gloat, but I've had a couple of good weeks with dirt plants the last couple of times we did this pod. I had DeAndre Hopkins last week, who ended up being in some winning lineups, so I was happy about that. I had Adam Thielen a couple of weeks ago. I think it was against Seattle when he blew up. So, I was kind of debating back and forth. I was thinking of maybe the Minnesota guys, but I think if T. Higgins is healthy, truly healthy, and he's going to play in this game, which it seems like he's going to, I think I'd lean towards him, right? And he's going to have an established role, if healthy, and we've seen it from him before. I'm kind of hoping that he's not just serving this decoy role, or that he's going to be limited. But everything that I've seen so far makes it sound like he's going to play. So yeah, I mean, if he's out there, I think T. Higgins is going to be good. I don't think anyone is going to want to click him. So I'm going to go with T. Higgins as my dirt plant.
Yeah, I like that one too. Like you mentioned, we have seen some decoy games from him in the past, and that could scare people off. But if he's healthy, he's absolutely capable of a blow-up game. So I like that one as well. And I think that will do it for the Week 6 GPP Game Scores podcast. Mercifully, Mike Leone is expected back next week, so you guys will not, in all likelihood, have to listen to me again. Thank you, Adam, for coming on today. And
Thanks, Jack. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And we will see you guys next week.